Welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. And I want to start this episode with something that might feel a little bit unexpected and probably a little uncomfortable and maybe I don't know, a little bit weird because honestly, that's kind of the energy of this entire conversation that we are getting into today. I was talking to one of my personal training clients recently, and he told me that he went to a celebration of life. And then he said something that immediately stuck with me. He said something along the lines of, I didn't really want to go. It made me uncomfortable, but I went anyway. And then he said the part that changed the way I interpreted what he said. He said that he started meeting all of these people who had known the same person and were there to celebrate the life of the same person, but they knew that person in completely different ways. People who knew them for decades, people who knew them very briefly, people who knew them in totally different chapters of their life. And he said it felt like everyone was talking about a different person, even though they were all talking about the same person. And that right there is what today's episode is about. Because when things like this happen in life, I go, okay, let me file that away. This means something. My brain starts working. So we're going to dive into a lot of identity today, perception, and the very strange but very real truth that you are not just one singular person. You are multiple versions of yourself, depending on who you're with, where you are, what stage of your life you're in, where we're going to talk about the version of you that exists in other people's heads, the impact that you have on people without even realizing it, and the idea that you are actively becoming somebody's story right now. It's all very intriguing to me. Hopefully it's as intriguing to you. So we're going to get a little bit reflective. We're going to get so deep. We're going to get a little existential crisis because why not? But don't worry, we're keeping it hot air. We're keeping it real. We're keeping it unhinged enough just to make you question maybe your entire identity in a fun way. So, if you've ever felt like you're different in different situations, I have. If you've ever wondered how people actually see you, I have. Or if you've ever thought about the kind of impact that you're leaving on people around you, I have. This episode is for you. And before we get into it, make sure you are tapped in because we're building something big over here. I've got a lot of fun things coming up. We're almost at episode 100. So you're going to want to make sure that you're following me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod for even more content, more chaos. I'm going to be posting a fuckload more. Head over to hotairwithjoshuarobert.com to shop my merch, submit your listener stories, and send in your topic suggestions because that is what helps the podcast keep going. Okay, let's get reflective. Let's get real honest with ourselves, and let's hit it. Part 1. Celebrations of life are weird. All right, I'm going to start this by saying something that might feel pretty controversial, but let's just stay with me for a second. Celebrations of life feel weird. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all. I actually think that they are beautiful and meaningful and important if you want them to be. But also, they're kind of strange. They're conceptually, emotionally, and socially, there's just a lot happening all at once, and your brain does not quite know where to land. And this whole episode actually came from that conversation that I had with one of my clients. Just to recap, mid-workout, we're sweaty, slightly delusional, emotionally open in ways that might not be open otherwise. And my client he used to be a psychotherapist. And he tells me about the celebration of life, how he did not want to go, how it made him feel uncomfortable, but he went anyway. And I totally get that feeling because I don't generally go to funerals or celebrations of life. I do something on my own to celebrate that person because I just feel so uncomfy at these things. And I think the person that we're celebrating would want me to celebrate them in a way that I feel is more fitting for my personality. So I don't tend to go to funerals or celebrations of life. But I think a lot of people feel this way, but they don't say it out loud. There's a weird tension around events like this. You want to show up, you want to be respectful, you want to support the people who are grieving, but at the same time, there's this internal discomfort that we really can't explain. It's what is the correct way to behave? Are we sad? Are we smiling? Are we reminiscing? Are we networking? Because somehow it always turns into a little bit of that networking energy. And I'm why am I meeting someone's coworker, making small talk about what they do while we're holding a glass of wine next to a photo or a slideshow of someone who is now dead and like shows their life? Like the emotional whiplash here is like beyond. And then there's the conversations in general, the classics like, how do you know them? Which feels like a very simple question, but suddenly becomes this loaded moment where you're trying to quickly summarize that elevator pitch almost of your entire connection to a person in a sentence that feels respectful or accurate and not like weirdly self centered. And you're standing there like, well, we met through who even knows? And your brain is just scrambling. I remember being at events like this when I used to go to them in the past and feeling this exact weird kind of way, the sense of being out of place while also being exactly, I guess, where you're meant to be. It's like you're stepping into this shared emotional space, but everyone in that space is experiencing it completely differently. And that's what my client pointed out that I thought was so interesting. That's something that, frankly, I've never really thought about before. He said that the thing that stuck with him the most was that the ceremony itself, it was the people. It was meeting all of these different people, all these individuals who had known the same person, but in very different ways. So there were people there that had known this person that had passed for 20 years, people who had known them for only a few years, people who had known them in childhood, people who worked with them, people who had been close friends at one point and then drifted. And every single one of these people had a completely different story about who this person was. And that's, I guess, when it kind of hit me, right? And probably hits you if you go to these events. You're not just attending a memorial, you're witnessing, for lack of a better word, like a mosaic. You're seeing a life not as one singular narrative, but as a collection of experiences and perspectives, relationships, and moments that are all layered on top of each other. And I think that's the part that makes these events feel so emotionally complex because you're not just processing loss, you're processing scale. You're realizing how many different lives this one person touched, how many different versions of themselves existed depending on who they were with and what stage in life they were in and what role they were playing. And frankly, it is kind of overwhelming. We like to think of people in very simple terms. Oh, they were this kind of person or they were like this, like just putting a label on it. But when you're in a room that is full of people who all knew them differently, then the simplicity disappears and suddenly that person becomes multidimensional in ways that are pretty much impossible to fully grasp. And I had a moment like this myself, not even at a celebration of life, but in a completely different context. I remember being at an event where I met someone who knew a mutual friend of mine, and they started describing this mutual friend in a way that felt extremely foreign to me. Not wrong, it was just different because they knew them in a different capacity. They had experienced a version of this person that I had never seen. Just like people experience me now differently than they did 10 years ago, but my friends from 10 years ago still associate an old version of me with who I am now. And I remember thinking, like, wait, that's not who they are. But also then immediately realizing that is who they are, just not to me. It's kind of complicated. But that realization is kind of humbling because it forces you to confront the fact that your experience of someone is not the full picture. It is just your version. Just like when somebody's like could be having a terrible day, you never met them, they're an asshole to you. You assume they're always like that. They could just be having a shit day. That's exactly what my personal training client experienced at the celebration of life. And he said it was almost surreal listening to people share stories because it felt like they were talking about different people, but they weren't. They were all talking about the same person, just from different angles. And I think that's a moment where discomfort of these events starts to shift into something a little bit deeper because it's no longer just about grief. It's about perspective. It's about understanding that a life is not defined by one narrative or one role or one identity. It's defined by all of them. And yes, that is still weird and it's still awkward and it's still emotionally complex. You're still standing there trying to figure out whether you should laugh at a funny story or feel guilty for laughing because, like, is that appropriate now? And the answer is usually yes. But your brain is like, I don't know what the rules are here. And perhaps that's the point, right? Maybe there are not rules around this. Maybe the reason these spaces feel so strange is because they don't fit neatly into any one category. They're not solely sad, they're not purely celebratory, they're not just social, they're kind of like all of those things at once. You laugh, you cry, it's surreal. The best word is surreal. And humans, we don't always know how to handle that all at once. We like clarity, we like defined emotional lanes, and like this is not that at all. So we default to what we know, which is small talk and shared stories, light humor, and moments, small moments of connection. And we kind of, I guess, feel our way through it. And honestly, there's something very, very human about that, which maybe that's why I stopped going to funerals and celebrations of life because it's far too human. And I mean, that was before I was quote unquote healed by therapy. So I might handle it differently now. But there is something that is very real about a room that is full of people trying to process something big in their own way and at their own pace and through their own lens. There's people there that are crying, there's people there that are laughing hysterically, people that just sit quietly, people that talk a lot, people that really hit the buffet or the bar, people that avoid eye contact entirely, and all of that, I suppose all of that is valid because again, everyone is experiencing a different version of the same moment and a different person. So a different form of grief and loss. And that, again, is what sticks with me. It wasn't just that celebrations of life are weird. It's why they feel that way. It's because they expose something that we don't usually think about on a daily basis. And they show us that a single person can mean completely different things to different people. And then me being me, I go, what the fuck do I mean to all of these different people? People who have known me forever, family who've obviously parents have known me since the day I was born, people who I'm just meeting and connecting with. Like I'm a different person to all of those people. It really like confuses my brain, but gets the wheels turning. And that is where this episode starts to open up, right? Because if it's true about them, the people that we're celebrating that have passed, it's true about you and it's true about me. Okay, but before we go there, I want to leave you with a question. I'm not really going to leave you long because this is a podcast, so I'm going to keep talking, but I want to ask you something. I want you to sit with it for a hot second. Maybe you want to pause. This is where things start to get interesting, right? If you were in that room, if people were sharing stories about you, what kind of stories would they tell? Not the version of you that you think that you are, not the version of you that you present online, the version of you that people have actually experienced. What would that sound like? And don't overthink it. Just notice what comes up. Because frankly, I'm still trying to come up with an answer because I really don't know. But that question, that is where everything starts to shift. And that's really the base of this episode and where we're going to take this conversation. So, part two, you're not one person, you're many. Now, let's say you paused and answered that question. That's where we're going to pick back up. This is where things go from an interesting observation to slightly more existential crisis, but in our fun, hot air way, right? So, again, my client at this celebration of life, right? He's meeting all these people who knew the one person in completely different ways across completely different periods of their life. And what he said had stuck with me, right? It felt like everyone was talking about a different person. And that's where the question, what are people going to say about you? All of these different people that know you in different aspects of life. Same name, same face, same human. Well, maybe not same face, depends on how much filler, Botox, or facelift you had. But same human, but wildly different experiences. And that's when you notice you're not one person, you are many. And I don't think really we have enough time to sit with that and think about that enough. Like we're in our own heads. We feel consistent. We feel like this is who I am. Wherever you are in life, there is a through line. There is a narrative. There's a sense of identity that feels stable. But the moment that you zoom out and you look at yourself through other people's experiences with you, that stability kind of dissolves because you are not the same version of yourself in every room. And you're not the same person with your best friend as you are with your family. You are not the same person at work as you are on like a wild night out. You're not the same version of yourself today as you were 5 years ago or that you might be tomorrow. And yet there are people out there who only know that older version of you and still see you that way. And that is fucking wild and kind of blows my mind. Like I still think of my little sister as being like 8 years old. She's like stuck in that age in my head. And there are people that are walking around with a different version of you in their head that doesn't exist anymore. And you have zero control over that. Like, is that not insane? There are people who knew you during a very specific chapter of your life. Maybe you were more insecure. Maybe you were more chaotic. We've all been a little more chaotic. Maybe you were quieter. I definitely had a period like that. Maybe you were in a completely different phase. You dress differently, you act differently, and that version of you is just like locked in for them, and they don't know who you've become since. They don't know what you've grown through. They don't know what you've learned or how you've changed. They just have that version. And at the same time, there are people who only know the current version of you, right? They have zero context for who you used to be. And you almost have to educate them and fill them in on your past because they don't know your past or your patterns or your habits, your previous identities. They just know you as you are now and as you show up. So when I think about this, my mind goes like, okay, which one is real? Like, who's the real me? Am I still 16 or am I going to be turning 30 something in a few weeks? Not a few weeks, actually, a few months, but whatever. But like the answer to that, which one is real, is all of them. That is the answer. And I think that's what makes this idea almost unsettling, but also very freeing because we spend a lot of our time trying to define ourselves as one singular thing. This is who I am. This is my personality. This is my identity. I'm an artist. I'm a singer. I'm a dancer. I'm a podcaster. I can only be one of those. But in reality, you are fluid. You are contextual. God, that was a hard contextual. Why can't I say that? You are constantly adapting based on your environment, your relationships, your experiences, and you are a collection of versions. And I had a moment like this not too long ago that brought all of this into focus for me. I was in a room with people from completely different parts of my life, like a very, very weird crossover episode. Like, when your worlds collide and you look around and you're like, oh, these people should not be in the same room at the same time because they knew very different versions of me. Like, I had friends from the dance community like that know me as a professional dancer, and then I have people from my current life that only know the more professional marketing version of me, and then someone who knew me from like years ago who I'm like basically brother sister with, and watching them all interact is like watching different timelines of my life overlap in real time, and it's fucking mind blowing, honestly. And I remember feeling this weird, like almost like a tension, like, wait, which version of me am I supposed to be? Because we know it's very easy to revert back to older versions of ourselves. Like the version of me that one group knows is not the same version that the other group knows. And suddenly I'm like hyper aware of how I'm speaking, how I'm walking, how I'm acting, how I'm presenting myself. And I'm like, wait, who am I today? Which one is real? And then I was like, hey, wait a second. All of those versions are real. They're just a growth, a evolution of you. Like, I'm not being fake in any of those versions. I'm just expressing different parts of myself depending on the context. And I do think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. They think that if they show up differently in different spaces, it means that they're being inauthentic. But that's not necessarily true, right? It's just human. You adjust, you adapt, you emphasize different parts of your personality depending on who you're with or what the environment is, what the event is, what the dynamic is. That doesn't mean that you're fake. It means you are socially aware and that you just have different connections with different people. I think this shows up a lot when we're dating somebody new and they meet our friends and it's like, oh, do I act like an absolute lunatic like I normally do with my friends? Will the person I'm dating run for the hills? Like, that's probably when this shows up in most of our lives. But there's a difference between adapting and performing, and that is important. If you feel like you're constantly putting on an act, like you're not able to be yourself at all, that's a different conversation for another time, perhaps another episode. But simply having different sides of yourself, that is normal. That's being multidimensional. And I think that what my client witnessed at that celebration of life was pretty much like the ultimate example of all of this. He saw how one person had lived multiple lives within a single lifetime, and not in a dramatic like identity crisis way, but in a way that feels like relatable. They were one person to their family, another to their coworkers, another to their childhood friends, another to people they met later in life, and all of those versions were real, they were valid, and they were meaningful. And to see all of that in a room when you look at it from that perspective can be very, very eye opening. But I think there's something really powerful about recognizing yourself in that because it takes the pressure off of trying to be one fixed identity. We all want to I think we try to force ourselves to fit into one box, but we don't have to. Like, you don't have to define yourself in one specific way. You don't have to be the same person in every situation. That almost feels more unnatural, right? You are allowed to evolve. You're allowed to shift. You're allowed to grow into brand new fucking versions of yourself while honoring the ones that came before. But this is also important. You have to be aware of which versions of yourself that you are carrying forward. Some of us are afraid to let go of these old versions, even if they're holding us back. Like, not every version of you needs to come with you into your next chapter. Some of them definitely deserve to stay in the past, okay? Some certain versions served you at a time, like in a very certain context, and that is where they belong, in that context, in that version of you. And if you keep operating from those outdated versions, you're going to feel very misaligned. Like we talked about earlier, you're going to feel performative. So, because this is hot air, here's a tool that I want to give you for this segment. I want you to identify 3 versions of yourself, and I'll do it with you. Okay. So let's start with the version of you that you used to be. I would say I used to be, I think I had a lot of self hate. I used to be very angry. I used to be extremely stubborn. I used to have a very short fuse. All of those things still exist, but they're not as prevalent, I think is the word I'm looking for. They're not as noticeable on a day-to-day basis. The version of me that I used to be is honestly very similar to the version of internalized homophobia that I talked about in episode 3 or 4 of this podcast. And then the next, the version of you that you are right now. And I think the version of who I am right now is hell of a lot more confident, very driven, has goals, has a vision for the future. I feel stable. I feel a hell of a lot more calm. I think I am still working on myself and working on my relationships with friends and family and romantic relationships and helping nourish. I think I'm really focused on nourishing the relationships that are, serving me currently, that are bringing positivity into my life. So the version of me right now is like elevated, glowing up, dozzies. I'm a Leo. Hello. And then the third one is the version of you that you are becoming or that you want to be. And I'd say the version of me that I want to be a boss bitch. I want to continue being entrepreneurial. I want to make a difference in the world. I want to see my goals, my dreams come to fruition, be tangible. And yeah, honestly, I want my name in lights again. I want to be known and I want to make a fucking positive difference. So, those 3 things are the version of you that you used to be, the version of you that you are right now, and the version that you are becoming or want to become. I think it's a really interesting practice or interesting question to ask yourself. And when you do, get really honest about each one. Like, it is okay to sit down and write this out and be brutally honest with yourself. Like, what defined the past versions of you? What were your habits, your mindset, your behaviors? Like, what did you tolerate? What did you believe then that maybe is different now? Like, what defines your current version? Where are you now? What patterns are still present? What has changed? Maybe what hasn't changed? And then, the most important part is the version of you that you are becoming or want to be. Like, what does that person think? How do they act? What do they prioritize? What do they no longer put up with? Like, what do you no longer tolerate in the optimal version of you? Because once you have clarity on that, you can start making decisions that align with the version that you're stepping into instead of defaulting back to the version you've outgrown, which we've all done. And it's okay to do that sometimes, but we want to evolve and move forward. And if you do want a deeper dive into identity and how it evolves over time, exploring identity theory can be really interesting. Like, it looks at how our roles and relationships shape who we are, which is exactly what we're talking about here. Right. So, identity theory, we'll do an episode about it, but start looking into it so you know what I'm talking about when we get there. And now I want to bring this into a listener question because this ties in perfectly. I sometimes get DMs based on whatever episode comes out, and people will ask questions, and we'll chit chat back and forth a little bit. But somebody asked, why do I feel like a different person in different situations? Like I don't know who I fully am. And the answer is that you're not confused. You're a complex human being. We are all complex. Feeling different in different situations doesn't mean you don't know who you are. It means you're experiencing different parts of yourself in different contexts. And the real question is, do those parts feel aligned? Do they feel authentic? Or do they feel forced now? Because if they feel aligned, that's just you being multidimensional. That's you. That's normal. But if they feel forced, if you feel like you're constantly shrinking or adjusting or performing in a way that doesn't feel true to who you are now, then that is something to look at. Because at the core of all of these different versions of you, there is a consistent thread. There are values, traits, and patterns that carry all the way through. And the goal is not to eliminate the different versions, it is to make sure that they are all rooted in something that feels real and authentic and feels like you. So, yes, you are many people. We all have multiple personality disorder, okay? So the question is, are they all versions that you are proud of? And hey, if not, because sometimes we're not proud of those versions, which ones are you ready to leave behind? Part 3, the versions of you that live in other people's heads. So now that we have very clearly established that you are not one single person, you're many, baby, okay? We need to talk about something that is both fascinating and also slightly terrifying. There is a version of you that exists in other people's heads, and you do not control it. Not fully, not accurately, not in the way that you think you do. And I think you should sit with that yet again for just like a hot second, because this is where things do get a little bit uncomfortable. You can control how you show up now. You can control your actions, your words, your energy. But the way those things are interpreted and remembered and stored by other people, that is completely out of your hands. And frankly, we're all misunderstood. So it could be a very different interpretation than you mean it. There are people out there who think that you are incredibly confident. And there are people out there who think you're insecure. There are people who think you're kind and warm and generous. And there are people who think that you're distant, intimidating, maybe a little cold, and a bitch. Like, been there, done that, right? Same person, different perceptions. And the wild part is they're kind of all real. Not objectively true, but real to them. Because people are experiencing you through their own lens, through their own biases. Biases? I think it's biases. Their own insecurities, their own expectations, their own emotional state at the time that they interacted with you. So someone might meet you on a day where you're feeling like a little off, a quieter, a little more reserved, and that person walks away thinking like, ooh, they're like a little bit standoffish. And then meanwhile, someone else meets you when you're energized and you're open, maybe you're really caffeinated and you're full of yourself, and they're like, wow, they're so engaging, they're so fun, they're so easy to connect with. And now there are two completely different versions of you walking around in the world. And that is where people start to spiral a little bit because they realize, like, wait, I can't control how people see me. And the answer is you can't control it entirely, but you can influence it. You can shape it to a degree, but you can't guarantee it. And that, I think, is where so much anxiety comes from. Like, there's this need to be understood correctly by everyone, this need to manage perception perfectly, this pressure to make sure that every single person sees you the way you see yourself. And that's like fucking impossible, okay? It's an impossible standard because you are not being experienced the same way by everyone. I have friends that love somebody that I absolutely can't stand. They just see a different version of them. Like, and let me give you like a very real, relatable example, okay? There are people who have listened to this podcast, this very episode probably, and they have completely different opinions of me. There are people who feel like they know me, like, oh my God, I get him, I relate to him, I feel connected to him, which I fucking love. And then there are people who are like, oh my God, he's a lot, he's intense, he's dramatic, he's too blunt, he's over the top. My dad thinks I swear too much. And I'm like, some people love that I curse and that I'm just like straight up and honest, and other people don't. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Both of those things exist. Both of those experiences are valid from these people's perspectives, but neither one is the full motherfucking picture. I just had to swear because I feel like my dad doesn't like it, so now I need to. And that is the part you gotta make peace with, right? That no version of you is the full picture. Like, if you spend your life trying to control every version of you that exists in other people's minds, you're gonna lose yourself in the process. You will start performing, you will start filtering, you will start editing yourself to fit what you think people wanna see, and that is so freaking exhausting. Been there, done that. Like, stop editing yourself if you're doing it. So that is the shift here. The real mindset shift is letting go of the need to be perfectly understood. And here's the truth: some people will misunderstand you, some people will misinterpret you, some people will have a incomplete or outdated version of you in their head, and that is okay. There are people that have told me that I have the worst resting bitch face. I actually was voted at a party to be the person who had the most resting bitch face. And I mean, kind of facts, but a lot of people take that as me being like unhappy and cunty and like moody, but it's just the Botox, people, okay? It's not ideal. It's not always comfy, but like, okay, whatever. Like, your job, my job, is not to manage every perception. It is to show up consistently in a way that aligns with who I am and who you are. And over time, the right people, they're going to see you clearly. And anyone who just like jumps the gun and judges you right off the get go, like, sayonara anyway. So I'm going to share like a little personal moment here that forced me to confront this, because it was definitely one of those situations where I realized just how little control I had over someone else's perception of me. So there was a time where I found out that someone had formed a very strong opinion about me based on very limited interactions with me. Like, maybe a few conversations, a few observations, social media, like nothing deep. And the version of me they had created in their mind was so off, in my opinion, from how I see myself, how my close friends see me, how I actually operate in life. And my initial reaction was that I wanted to fix it. I wanted to explain myself. I wanted to correct the narrative. I wanted to be like, no, 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 no. You don't understand. That is not who I am. But then in that moment, I had one of those realizations that I actually didn't need to do that. And I frankly didn't care, because not every perception needs to be corrected. Maybe over time, maybe those people will be open to seeing you in a different way, but not every misunderstanding needs to be addressed. Let those people think you're a bitch and you're moody. Who gives a flying fuck? If they really get to know you, they'll know the real you. And sometimes you just let people have their version of you and you keep living your life. Like, does it matter? Do I think about that person or that version of me anymore? I do not. And it doesn't mean you don't necessarily care. It means you're not attaching your identity to every external opinion. Like, if you do, you're going to constantly be shifting and adjusting and trying to fit into versions of yourself that don't actually feel true. And like, you're going to have real multiple personality disorder, like not in a fun, jokey way, like we've been saying, right? But let's bring this all back to that celebration of life for just a second, because that's where this all connects. And at least in my brain, makes a lot of sense. So imagine being in that room, hearing all these different stories about one person. Some stories might resonate with you, and you're like, yes, that's exactly like who they were. And then others might feel unfamiliar, and you're going to be like, wow, I never saw that side of them. And both of those things, well, they can exist at the same time, and they do exist at the same time. That person didn't need to control how they were being perceived by every single person in that room. They simply lived their life, showed up in their relationships, and those experiences became the stories that people carried with them. And that's really what you're doing, what I'm doing, what we are all doing right now. You are actively creating versions of yourself in other people's lives through your actions, through your presence and your energy. But you don't get to curate every detail of yourself. So here is a tool for this segment, and it's something that is called perception release. And it's honestly, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the practice of intentionally letting go of the need to control how everyone sees you. And wouldn't that be nice if it was like wildly easy? This doesn't mean that you stop caring how you show up. It doesn't mean you act however you want and ignore the impact that you have. It means that you focus on what you can control, which is your behavior, your values, your consistency, and then you release the rest. A simple way to apply this is to ask yourself two questions. Am I showing up in a way that aligns with who I want to be? And am I acting with integrity in my interactions? If the answer is yes, you're good. You don't even have to go into deep detail. Answer those two questions, yes or no. You don't need to overanalyze every conversation. You don't need to replay every interaction in your head, wondering if you said the right thing. Been there, done that. We all do that. It's not fun. If you came across the right way, who gives a flying fuck? If they understood you correctly, who gives a flying fuck? Because you can't control that. And if you want to explore that idea more, like if you want to get really into it, understanding social perception can be really helpful. Again, a topic we'll dig into on future episodes, but if you want to do some Googling and get in the know now, just Google social perception. It could help. It dives into how people form impressions of others and how these impressions are influenced by their own internal frameworks, not just your behavior. And again, I'm going to bring it back to a listener question because this is where people really feel this in their lives. Somebody commented on one of my posts and they said, I think it was on TikTok, and they said, "What do I do if I don't like how someone perceives me?" I forget what I was talking about, but that's obviously such a great question because it's very real. It's human. Of course, you want to be seen accurately. And like, of course, it's extremely frustrating when someone gets it wrong and doesn't see you how you think you're presenting yourself. But the honest answer is that you have two options. Option one, if the relationship matters to you, if this is someone important in your life, you can have a conversation. You can clarify, you can express yourself, you can give them more context, clarify whatever it is that needs to be clarified. And option two is if it doesn't matter, if this is not someone who plays a meaningful role in your life, you let it go and you simply don't think about it anymore. Who cares? If they are not adding value to your life, who cares what they think about you? Let them have their version of you and you keep moving on because not every perception deserves your energy, peeps. And I know that's not easy. It's not easy to just say, okay. It takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of work. It takes a strong sense of self that a lot of us are working towards. It takes trusting that the people who matter will see you for who you are over time. And I stand by that. The people who care will stick around and they'll get to know you on a different level. But that's the work, right? So, yes, there are versions of you living in other people's heads. Might feel weird. Kind of sounds weird to say. Some are accurate, some are incomplete, some outdated, some are completely off, and you don't need to chase them all down to fix them. You just need to make sure that the version of you that you are living with is the one that feels real. Because at the end of the day, that's the only one you actually have to live with, the real version of you. So make sure you're comfy living with yourself. Part 4, you are someone's core memory. So we're going to shift this a little bit away from the dramatic existential crisis to slightly emo level, right? But we're going to not get full sad. Okay. We're going to be more reflective, powerful, maybe a little gut check. Like we'll see how this goes. Like everything we talked about so far, the multiple versions of you, different perceptions, people holding different experiences of you, it all leads to this realization. You are someone's core memory. Like right now, actively, without even realizing it. And I think that we underestimate that in a very big way. We think impact has to be huge and dramatic and life changing and like movie moment energy in order to matter. Like you have to save someone, inspire someone, completely alter the trajectory of their life, like literally like lift a car off them, which I've always thought I could do. You know, if someone needed me to lift a car in my mind, I could do it. Again, I'm a Leo, but that's not how this actually works. Most of the time, the things that people remember about you are very small. It's something that you said offhand that stuck with them. It's how you made them feel in a moment they were already emotional. It's a random interaction that you probably forgot about 5 minutes later, but for them, it landed. And that's what my client was also seeing at this celebration of life. People weren't just sharing like big defining milestones. They were sharing these little moments, these tiny conversations and jokes and habits and energy, the way this person made them feel during a specific chapter of their life. And I just got full body chills. It's been a while since I had that. And what was so powerful about this is realizing that this person did not curate those moments. They didn't sit there thinking, okay, this is going to be a core memory for someone. Let me knock this out of the park. They were just like living. And yet those moments became part of how they are remembered. And that's what you and I and us all are doing right now. You are living moments that will eventually become stories about you. Isn't that fucking cool and also very scary? Like, that can feel so intense. So let's break it down. Let's bring it down to something more grounded. Like, so it's maybe not so intense because I just realized how intense this all feels. Like, think about people in your own life. Think about someone who had an impact on you, not necessarily someone who was in your life forever, but someone who just simply left an impression. Like, what do you remember? And it's usually not their resume or their degree or how much they make. It's not their job title. It's not the surface level bullshit details. It's how they made you feel. It's the way they showed up, the way they spoke to you, the way they supported you or challenged you or made you laugh or made you feel seen. And that's the part that really matters. And I had another moment like this very recently that kind of caught me off guard. I ran into somebody that I had not seen in years, a very, very long time, like friggin' probably a decade. And we started talking, catching up, doing the usual, like, what have you been up to kind of thing. And then they said something that like stopped me for a second. They brought up a moment, something I had said or done way back when that had stuck with them. Something that in my mind, like was completely forgettable because I have no memory of it, zero. But for them, it mattered. And I remember thinking like, wow, that was like a random Tuesday or something for me. That was like just me talking, me being myself. And somehow that became a moment that this person carried with them. And that is another moment when a lot of what we're talking about clicked for me. Like, you don't get to choose which moments people remember because I didn't remember that one. So clearly I didn't choose it, but you're creating them all of the time. And I think that's where this conversation becomes less about pressure and more about awareness. Like, I'm not saying you need to walk around constantly thinking like everything I do is going to define how I'm remembered. Like, that's exhausting. Again, that's performative. That's not realistic. That's not how anyone should live. But I am saying that the way you show up probably matters more than you think. The way you treat people, we know that. The energy you bring into a room, we know that. The way you respond in small moments, the consistency of your character, those things add up and those things will be brought up at your celebration of life. And they become the stories people tell about you, whether you are there to hear them or not. And let's tie this back to identity for a quick sec, because this is where it connects to everything that we've been talking about so far. You are not just building a life for yourself, you are also contributing to other people's experiences of life. And again, not in a heavy way. Like, you're not responsible for everyone's emotions, not in that kind of way. If you started going there, let's not go there. But this is more like a relational way. The version of you that someone experiences becomes a part of their story. And that doesn't mean you need to be perfect. It doesn't mean you need everything. It doesn't mean you need to overextend yourself or constantly perform. It just means be intentional. Like, be aware of how you show up because your presence has impact. And whether you realize it or not, it does. And I notice this a lot because when I go to work, I work at a private country club where I personal train. I try to say good morning to everyone. I try to smile and be like chipper. Like, that's just kind of me when I'm at work. I really enjoy my time that I spend with these members. And then I hear from other trainers that their clients say to them, Josh is always so happy. He's always so nice. He always has a smile on his face. And it's like, definitely not intentional. It's not performative. It's not something I really think of like until it's brought to my attention. But those people take that chipperness or that joy or that smile with them throughout the day. And it's really not that difficult to be that way. Sometimes I'm sarcastic with them. Sometimes I make jokes with them. And that makes a difference in their little daily life. I've been working with these people for almost 4 years, I think, teaching classes with them. So I formed a community and relationships, and they will probably remember me for the rest of their lives, just like I will remember certain, not all of them, because there's a lot, but like certain ones that have made an effort to impact me and to connect with me. So whether you realize it or not, people are affected by you like every 12 seconds. So I want to give you another tool for this segment that keeps it grounded and actionable without being too overwhelming. It is called micro impact awareness, and it's very easy. So instead of trying to overhaul your entire personality or become some idealized version of yourself overnight, focus on very small moments, okay? Ask yourself, how do I make people feel in everyday interactions? Do people feel heard when they talk to me? Do people feel respected? Do people feel like I'm actually present or like I'm distracted? Do people feel uplifted or drained? And again, it's not about perfection. You're not going to get it right every time. Some of those might be yes and no. You're human. You have your own moods, your own stress, your own off days. But the goal is consistency over time. There's days I go to work and I don't smile at anyone because I'm in a terrible mood or some shit went down or God, who knows, rent is due. So I'm not as chipper, but I'm more chipper than I am pissed off and depressed though, because consistent small moments create lasting impressions. And if you want to explore this idea from a psychological perspective, understanding emotional memory is very interesting. It looks at how emotions influence what we remember and why certain interactions stick with us more than others. Another thing that we'll talk about on a future episode. And again, we're going to bring it back to a listener question because this is where people start to feel this personally. Someone reached out to me, or this is probably something I read on someone else's comments at some point in time or something, because I'm sure some of these are not all like exact listener letter. So I had opened up, I think I posted a story a long time ago about questions relating to one of the episodes. And someone said, how do I make a positive impact on people without feeling fake or forced? Because there are plenty of us that want to ensure that we're like, doing a good job in life and leaving a positive mark. And like, I love that question because it gets like right to the heart of it. Like, you don't need to perform kindness though. You don't need to perform or force connection. You don't need to be overly polished or overly like on all the time. I'm not always on, right? You just need to be present and intentional. That's again the theme, the basis of this episode. When you just listen when people are talking, like actually listen, not waiting for your turn to speak, not half distracted, not thinking about what you're going to say next, like active listening. We learned this in what? Kindergarten. Be genuine in your interactions. If you appreciate something about someone, say it. If you enjoy someone's energy, let them know. Like those small authentic moments are what people remember, not the big performative gestures. So like, no, you don't need to become a completely different person to make an impact. It's just not a thing. You just need to be a slightly more intentional version of yourself. Like someone asking that question clearly wants to do well and make people feel good. You're already impacting people, highly likely. You're already part of someone's story. The question is, what kind of story are you contributing to? One thing I told myself I wanted to do more was if I see someone who has great hair or is just hot, whether it's male or female, or their body looks good, or they have a nice bag, or their outfit, like something, why not just tell them? Like, why do we just think it and we don't let these people know? So that's something I've been trying to retrain my mind to just be like, you're beautiful. Damn, girl, you're hot. Clearly, I don't like men, but you look good, Like, why not let these people know? So this is about showing up in a way that feels aligned, consistent, and real. Like one day, far, far, far in the future, hopefully far in the future, people are going to be telling stories about you. And those stories, they're being written right now. Part 5. You are living a life worth talking about. All right, friends, we're going to take everything we talked about and we're going to turn it into a question that might feel a wee bit not comfy, uncomfy, maybe a little confronting and also incredibly clarifying. Are you living a life that is worth talking about? And before you get defensive, this is not about being impressive. This is not about being successful in some flashy external Instagram worthy way. No, this is not about having the craziest stories or the most dramatic life or being the most interesting person in the room. This is about depth. This is about presence. This is about whether the way you are living actually creates moments that mean something to you and to the people around you. Because here's what we've just established, right? You are going to be talked about a lot. Your life is going to be remembered in pieces, in moments, in stories that people carry with them, whether you like it or not. So the question isn't if people are going to talk about you. The question is, what will there be to say? And again, not from a place of ego, not from a place of I need to be remembered in some grand dramatic way, but from a place of intention, because there is a difference between living and existing. I think a lot of us have been existing and just running through the motions, really. A lot of people, without even realizing it, are defaulting to existing. You wake up, you go through your routine, you check your boxes, you do what you need to do, you get through the day, and then you repeat it. How fucking boring. Boring, boring, boring. No. And okay. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it's fucking boring. I can't handle it. We all have structure. We all have days that are just days, right? Not every day of mine is like, I'm a podcast star. Like, it's not always like that. But when that becomes your entire life, that are just days when there's no intention, no growth, no presence, no connection, just repetition, no goals, nothing to look forward to, then that's when things start to feel very flat. And it gives me a lot of stress just thinking about it. That's when you look back and you're like, what did I actually do? What did I experience? What did I create? What did I contribute? And before you know it, you're 85 years old. Like the reality is, people don't remember your routine. Nobody cares. They remember your presence within it. They remember how you showed up. And I had a moment recently that really made me think about this for like a hot second in a real way. I had a conversation with someone, very casual combo, and they were talking about a person in their life who had passed away. This isn't my client. This is an unrelated story. And the way they described them wasn't about achievements or milestones or big accomplishments. It was about how they lived. They talked about their energy, their humor, the way they made people feel comfortable, the way they showed up consistently, the little things that they did that made a difference in everyday moments. And those are the things that last. Like when I talk about my best friend Lindsay, who passed away, I think it was almost a decade now, 9 years, 8 or 9 years. Like, I think about how she motivated me, how she was my biggest cheerleader, her laugh that was contagious, how fucking funny she was, and her sense of fashion, and how everyone just literally enjoyed being around her. I also talk about how she was always late for school because she was doing her eyeliner, and how she would go to sleep during our film class right across from me in the classroom, put her head down and go to sleep. And the teacher would just be like, oh, that's Lindsay. Like, those are hilarious little moments and things that people talk about, not these big, gigantic things. It's these small moments that matter. It's those little things that make the difference, not the perfectly planned life, not the image, not the highlight reel, the way that you just exist in your life. Even though we shouldn't just exist, but it's the way you exist in your life. And I think a lot of people are waiting for their life to become interesting and meaningful and impactful. Like it's something that just like happens at some point. Like one day you wake up and suddenly you're living this life that people talk about. Like that is not how it works. It is built, it is created, it is a lot of hard work. It's shaped by your choices, your actions, your willingness to engage with your life instead of just moving and floating through it. And I'm not saying that you need to completely overhaul everything overnight. This is not a quit your job, move across the world, reinvent yourself immediately kind of moment. Although, love it if that's your choice. So down with that. This is about small shifts in how you show up. Are you present in your conversations or are you distracted? Are you engaging with people or just going through the motions? Are you creating moments or just filling time? Because those small shifts, they change everything. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about living a life that is quote unquote life worth talking about is that it has to be extraordinary in a big, obvious way. And it doesn't. It simply doesn't. It just has to be intentional. It has to be lived with some level of awareness, connection, and presence. Like someone who is fully present and fully engaged and fully themselves, which again is a lot easier said than done, that's interesting. That is memorable. That is impactful. We all know somebody who like walks into a room and you're like you're so you and you can't even put your finger on it, right? They're just so you and they've never wavered from that. They've experienced different things, they've had growth, they've become a new version of themselves, but they've always just been them. We all know somebody. And that's what we will talk about at their celebration of life. Like if people were sharing stories about you right now, real stories based on their actual experiences, what patterns would show up? Would they describe you as someone who is engaged, intentional, present? Or would they describe you as someone who is distracted, inconsistent, and kind of just there in the background? And again, this isn't about judgment. This is about awareness because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. Okay. Let's be aware. And I think that is where a lot of people get stuck. They don't actually look at their life honestly. They look at their intentions, things they might want to do. They look at what they mean to do or meant to say. They look at what they plan to do, but they don't look at what they're actually doing. And those are two very different things. So here is a tool that I want to give you for this segment, and it is called the story check. And again, it is simple but powerful. At the end of your day, or even just maybe it's throughout your week or at the end of your week, I want you to ask yourself, if someone were telling a story about me based on today or this week or this month, what would that story sound like? And it doesn't need to be a whole day, just moments. Would it be a story about you being present and engage and like showing up and fucking grabbing life by the balls? Would it be a story about you connecting with someone and making them feel seen? Would it be a story about taking action on something that matters to you? Or would it be a story about you being distracted, going through the motions, and not really being there? Again, not about perfection. You're not going to have a perfect story every single day. That's not realistic. But over time, your patterns emerge. And those patterns, that's your life. That is your life. Your life is just a series of patterns. And if you want to explore this idea from a more psychological perspective, understanding narrative identity is also very interesting. It looks at how we construct our identities through the stories we tell about ourselves. Like, that's some deep shit right there. And how others do the same. Something we'll talk about on another episode. So at the end of the day, your life is a collection of stories and patterns, some that you tell, some others tell, some you remember. For me, some I forget a lot, but they all add up. Now, I have one more listener question. Someone asked, what if I feel like my life is boring or not meaningful right now? And first of all, this is so common, even for me, people. Like, so many people feel this way at some point. I'm like, what am I doing sometimes? Like, I think I'm being lazy, but everyone has a different perspective. It doesn't mean your life is actually boring. It just means that you might be disconnected from it. Like, meaning doesn't come from external excitement. It comes from internal engagement. You could be doing something exciting, quote unquote exciting, but feel like completely disconnected, and it won't feel meaningful at all. Or you could be doing something very simple, but be fully present and fully engaged and fully yourself, and it becomes like the best thing ever. So if you feel like your life is lacking, if it's lacking something, don't immediately assume that you need to change everything externally. Start by changing how you're showing up internally. Like, again, try to be more present, be more intentional, be more engaged with those moments that you are already in. Because meaning is not something that you find, right? It's something that you create. If your life doesn't feel meaningful, you find a new way to create meaning in your life. And that's really what this entire segment and episode, honestly, really is. You are not just living your life, you're shaping it how it will be remembered, not in a distant future way, but like right now. Just think about right now in real time through your actions, your presence, your choices. So, no, you don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to be intentional. And a life worth talking about is a life that was actually lived. And just to share my personal story, I work multiple jobs, right? Not every day, no day is the same. Every Monday is similar to every Monday. Every Tuesday is similar to every Tuesday, and so on and so on. And even that for me, because I am me, can become very monotonous. And I'm like, oh, it's another Tuesday, even though I'm working with different people, training different clients, teaching different classes, have a different schedule, end at a different time. Like, it is very different. But I like variety. I need to feel engaged and excited. So I do try to find these moments where maybe I'm laughing with one of my clients and we're telling a funny joke. Specifically, my client Polly, who's 81. She's so fucking funny, so sarcastic. Her and I have a very similar sense of humor. And there's moments when I feel like I'm like going through the motions. And then I look and I'm like, I am actually helping this woman live longer while we're laughing at each other, while we're being sarcastic, like maybe poking fun at maybe somebody else around us, like probably her assistant or something. Like, we have a good time. And I'm also learning things from her because why not learn something from somebody who's extremely successful in their 80s, who's lived a whole set of lives before you've even met them. So finding those moments when you're feeling engaged, feeling authentic, when you feel like you're making a difference, even though they're very small, can kind of break up that monotony. And that makes me feel like I'm less cruising through life and just like repeating the same thing day by day. It really makes me feel like I'm doing something that is worth talking about. So I feel like this is one of those episodes you gotta go sit with for a second. Like, we unpacked a lot, right? We started with something very simple, a celebration of life, and it turned into something so big. Like, I think my mind is still wrapping itself around this whole concept. We talked about how you are not just one version of yourself. You are many versions of yourself, how different people experience completely different sides of you depending on when and how they know you. We got honest about the fact that there are versions of you living in other people's heads that you don't fully control and that you may not be a fan of. And that learning to let go of that is part of stepping into who you really are. We talked about the impact you have on people in small, everyday moments, the fact that you are already part of someone's story, already someone's memory, whether you realize it or not. And we brought it all the way back to your life, your choices, your presence, and asked the question, are you actually living a life in a way that feels intentional, feels aligned, and feels like something worth remembering? And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it is this. You don't need to be everything to everyone. You don't need to control every version of yourself that exists out there. You just need to be intentional about the version of you that you are living right now and that you're actually living as, because that is the one that matters. That's the one that you wake up with, that you move through the world with, and that you build your life with. So take that awareness, take that perspective, and maybe start showing up just a little more present, a little more intentional, a little more you. And if this episode hit you, if it made you like think, reflect, question something, share it, send it to someone who needs it, post it, tag me. Let's like get more people having this conversation. This is maybe one of the most important conversations or topics that I think I've had on this podcast about just living a life that is worth fucking talking about, that we are happy to leave behind. And also, of course, make sure you're following me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. Head over to hotairwithjoshuarobert.com to shop my merch, submit your listener stories, and send in your topic suggestions. And hopefully I'll cover them sometime because I always need some new topic suggestions. So stay living your life. Don't worry about what everyone is thinking about you. Just make sure that you feel like you're not floating and cruising through your schedule, that you feel like you're present, you're intentional, and you're proud of the life and the story that you're leaving behind. That was deep. Okay. And I will see you next Tuesday.